Breaking What makes this trimmer different from all the other trimmers? Well, a few things for me. A new multifunction on-off switch can engage a travel lock, created for people who like to travel, whichever dimension that might be in. The Lawnmower 4.0 gives you the ability to turn the 4000K LED spotlight on and off when needed for a more precise shave. The Phoenix lights have nothing on this. And the new trimmer even allows you to customise your trim overall through additional guard lengths. You get a couple of those included inside the box with sizes 1 to 4. So if it's tall Nordics or short greys, it's all good. And looks wise, it's sleek with a two-tone matte and gloss finish. Even features a hot foil stamped black chrome Manscaped logo. Look at that. That is a nice piece of kit. You know when you take it out of the box and you just feel the weight of it and you just feel it's a quality piece of kit. That is premium right there, the 4.0. Did I mention wireless charging? The Lawnmower 4.0's new wireless charging system uses electromagnetic induction, which can help battery length last longer. If you're still trimming your face with your ball trimmer, it's time to make some changes. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code AndyUFO at manscaped.com. Remember, that's 20% off and free shipping on any products they've got on the website. Thanks, folks.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. Oh my gosh. They're all going against the wind.
It was basically a cube with inside of a sphere where the points of the cube were touching outside of the sphere.
Roger. There's shooting
So this isn't anything that just is limited to the United States. It's a worldwide phenomenon.
Hey, this is Bryant Arnold, also known as Dragon from Skinwalker Ranch, and you're listening to That UFO Podcast.
Hi everyone, and welcome to That UFO Podcast. As always, my name is Andy, and just before I bring on the guest this week, don't forget, if you're enjoying the podcast, help us out by liking, subscribing, retweeting, leave a review, and now you can support the podcast for premium ad-free early access on patreon.com/That UFO Podcast, and now on Apple Podcast subscriptions as well, where you can still get that 2-week free trial for a lot of exclusive content too. Getting right into this one, folks. Looking forward to having a bit more of a technical conversation. I'm not a tech expert here. I've brought one on for me, and I think it's a very timely guest as well, especially from a lot of you sending me DMs and emails. I've got an expert in FLIR technology. I have Dave Falch. Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Andy. Appreciate it.
It's a real pleasure. Now, we seem to have hit this lull where for months and months and months we've built up to this UAP task force report, and for so many people it meant so many different things, and I can definitely see we're on like the downward side of the roller coaster now before we come back up. And at this moment I'm seeing a ton of videos online with people scrambling for stories or looking for something that's not there. And I think it's just what people are trying to do to fill the time in between the next big story. So I thought it'd be a really good time to speak with yourself, because you're an expert in FLIR technology, and maybe clear some of this up for people as well, and actually explain to us what we're looking at, what we should be looking at, and maybe some of the bits we should kind of stay away from as well. Before we get there, Dave, I'd love to know a little bit about you and your background. So do you mind taking us through who you are, any interest in UFOs and whatnot growing up, and kind of what's led you to where you are now?
Sure. I grew up in St. Louis, went to college there, but I couldn't really find a job in the 90s, so I ended up joining the Navy. And I worked as an aviation electronics technician, which kind of led me to my job today. Um, some of the things that I was interested in, alien stuff, it was just pretty much the same stuff as anybody else, like, Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind and just any kind of alien movies. I do like the Alien Predator kind of movies. Those are pretty cool. But as far as my background, after the Navy, I went back to St. Louis and couldn't really find my niche back in society there, shall we say. So I moved down to Florida, which is where I was in the Navy, in Jacksonville. And then I found a job working on FLIRs, and I've been doing that for the last 15 years.
Awesome. And for the layman like myself, who's not too good with different terminologies and whatnot, what was it you'd done as part of the Navy? Was it working with things like FLIR?
Well, it was aviation electronics at the intermediate level. So it's one level removed from the depot level, which is like the most advanced level where you break it down to nuts and bolts. The intermediate level is when another sailor will take a component, like a box, out of an aircraft, and he'll give it to me. And I'll say, okay, I've been trained to fix this box. So I'll fix the box, give it back to him. He'll install it back in the aircraft. He's in charge of all the aircraft avionics, but I'm in charge of fixing a specific box or component, that kind of thing, a line replaceable unit. So that's pretty much the essence of that.
And with the Navy, were you, again, excuse my ignorance, were you out on the ships, or do you stay like based somewhere on like an HQ or on the coast?
It kind of goes back to A school, your basic training in electronics. I got the skinny from some of the other sailors that if you wanted kind of a plus job, you wanted to be intermediate. So I got really lucky, and I was P3 Navy, which means the P3s don't land on aircraft carriers. Thus, we were land based, so I never went to a ship. So I pretty much had the cushy job of just like a 9-to-5 job, land based, fixing aviation electronics.
Awesome. And in that environment, was there ever any talk of UFOs, UAPs, things in the sky, or was it still, even in that environment, away from the craft themselves, like, was it still a taboo subject?
To be honest, we didn't really touch on it the time that I was in the Navy. I can't recall any time where there was anything like today, where it's gotten such a prominent notice in the media.
Now, you yourself, like you say, FLIR is something that the word, can you just talk about what FLIR is, what it means? Because I think for so many people, we're just so used to now saying, oh, FLIR, it's a FLIR camera. And we talk about it as if we know what we're talking about, but you're the expert. So do you mind breaking down what FLIR stands for and what it actually is?
Sure. FLIR is forward-looking infrared. It's not forward-looking infrared radar because it's passive. It doesn't emit anything except if you have lasers on it. So there's different manufacturers that make these FLIRs that you typically mount to aircraft. Sometimes you put on ships, but it's like a 9 to 20 inch ball. It's like got cameras on a chassis internal, and then it's rotated by a turret that does elevation and azimuth. Sometimes it's 4-axis. So this is it's usually 3 to 5 micron, which is a specific wavelength of infrared. So, for example, visible light is, I think it's between 400 and 700 nanometers. Near infrared is somewhere 9 to 1 point something micron, and then the 3 to 5 micron is the midwave. You have a short wave in between the near infrared and the midwave. You know, you can look at a chart, you can Google that kind of stuff. But to sum it up, typically government level FLIRs are using the 3 to 5 microns, which have certain characteristics, meaning they don't really care about light. I mean, they do, but they're all about detecting heat. So the cameras are different. That's what a lot of people are confused about, is a daylight camera doesn't look like a FLIR camera. It does sometimes because there's an overlap between the light and the heat. You know, sun shines down on grass, you're going to see the heat because the grass absorbs the heat. But it's not always that way. There's different characteristics to it, and that's where there's a lot of confusion. Even when you're talking about cameras around your house, like surveillance cameras, security cameras, those are near infrared. Those aren't picking up thermal radiation. Those are picking up light, because you see all the little LEDs that are around the camera sensor. Those are emitting that to bounce off what they're looking at, so then their camera can pick that up within that wavelength. Does it get more complicated or less?
You know, that's a good start. To be honest, as the mainstream has picked up on the UAP and UFO stories over the last few months, you've seen more and more comments online, especially the sphere videos from the USS. Was it the Russell or the Omaha? I get confused.
Yes.
Yeah,
Omaha, I believe.
Omaha, yeah. And there was so many comments from, again, just the general public of, you know, my phone can film blah, 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 but the military's best $100 million cameras can't even take a picture that's not grainy. And like you say, the context is just totally lost on people because it's picking up heat. It's not there to film a picture. It's filming stuff that's at, 3 miles away, I believe those spheres were. Is that about right? And it was 11 o'clock at night.
Right. I'm not sure about the distance, but yeah, that's totally within range.
Yeah, I think that's about right. From what I read anyway, I may be wrong, but it's in the ballpark, and that's the idea of it, isn't it? That, like you say, it's filming a heat signature. Some of your videos that I quite like, and I'll link to the YouTube channel, and I would encourage people who haven't seen them to go and check them out. You give really good examples of filming everyday objects, from a plane to a balloon to birds, which we'll get onto in a second as well. And some of them, and I think it's one of the balloon ones, you flick between the day camera and the infrared as well. Now, on another one of the videos, you show dead pixels, and then you cut to what you see as a UFO. And you show the UFO on FLIR, so your forward-looking infrared. But when you switch to the day camera, it's not there.
Right.
What is going on in a video when you're filming something that you, as an expert in this technology, say, this is a UFO, whatever that might mean, it's an unidentified object. Why is it appearing on infrared but not appearing on a day camera?
Yeah, the only other example I've ever seen of that is like the moon. When it's really hazy, the infrared will see through the atmosphere and you can see the moon. Sometimes that's kind of iffy too, but we've never seen any kind of orb remain kind of geosynchronous in the sky and then not being able to see them with two different day cams, the electro-optics, EO cams. So that's what my coworker was confused about when he came in and notified me. It wasn't even me that saw them first, but I took out the cell phone and I immediately saw it was something that was an anomaly. So I started recording. Unfortunately, at that time, we didn't even have recording equipment attached to the FLIRs when we test them out back, because there's really no reason to. After that, we've gone to putting recording equipment because it actually helps out with our day-to-day testing. But anyway, back to that video, it definitely looked like it was within the atmosphere. It was about plane size, 30 to 50 feet, something like that. And it could not be seen in the day cams, which didn't make sense because you're going to see at least something with the day cams. They're bore-sighted in to one camera to the other. So if you flip from day camera to the infrared and then to another camera, they should all see the exact same picture upon a picture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you have any ideas or theories, and this is more speculation, as to what that could be then?
The only thing I could have thought it been at the time, or that I'm trying to speculate. Maybe it was a blimp if it's just staying there. But what happened was we got a high def system because we couldn't really see too much with the one we were dealing with, and put it in its place. Now, when we took the one out and then put a new one in, the high def system, that takes about 5 minutes to cryogenically cool for the infrared detector to see the heat, thermal radiation. So within that 5 minutes, that object had completely disappeared from the span of the sky that we could see. So that doesn't make sense either, unless the balloon dropped out of the sky like the Hindenburg, something like that.
Which is possible, but it's you have to cover all the bases here, which is fair. And I'm never one just to jump to it's a UFO, it's a spaceship, it's this or that. It could be multiple different things, but like you say,
Sure.
it was certainly strange and warranted you looking at it. Now, just in the 10 minutes we've been talking about this equipment, there's a lot to it. How long does it take to study and qualify to use this equipment to the level you would be classified as an expert in it?
Well, just to work on the equipment by yourself in our shop, it takes about 2 or 3 years. So you're usually brought in from a technical background. We have a lot of veterans there that were in the avionics field. It takes, I wouldn't even know, maybe 5 to 10 years till you really know what you're doing. And I would say, yeah, I got about 15 years in, but there's people in there that have like 20, 25 years. They're the other two top guys that are working with me. So
are there any other backgrounds or industries where people could come in and have a bit of a head start on equipment like FLIR? And without naming names, I'm going to say if someone worked in the video gaming industry, would they have an exposure to technology that they could instantly pick up what FLIR was and how it worked, and if you get what I'm getting at?
Well, when I was interviewed, they were wondering a bunch of different stuff. What do I know? I knew a lot about computers. I knew how to solder. I knew a lot about through-hole technology, for soldering. I knew how to tear a car engine apart, not to where you're rebuilding, but I can take a water pump off, change a timing belt, stuff like that. That's the mechanical aspect that they're looking for, because it's electromechanical, optical. It's a whole bunch of things different going on. And nowadays it's becoming more digital to where your circuit cards are kind of throwaway. Sometimes you can fix them, but yeah, there's a big overlap of technologies that we're looking at. One of the guys in our shop actually is a car mechanic, but he was in the Navy. He was a chief, and he was an aviation electronics tech. So we know he has different level. You kind of want a jack of all trades, but focusing on the electronics.
Now, I suppose one of the most famous online or social media personalities would be Mick West, and I'm sure you've seen some of his videos and his testimony.
Not Mick West.
Yeah. So listen, I unfollowed Mick because I personally think he trolls quite a lot. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. He's an intelligent guy, which is clear that anyone who says otherwise is wrong. However, I look at someone like Mick, whose background is in developing computer games, and I see him talk with an air of confidence about a system that he has no real background in. He just seems to run his own experiments, which he claims to explain what we're seeing on these videos. How do you feel when you see people like Mick and others talk about this equipment with no real background in it? And what you hear, is there anything to what they say?
Yeah, Mick, he's kind of comical in a way. It started off a couple years when I was working with him. He would want me to do an experiment, like put a smudge of grease on an old window and then twist it in front of a FLIR camera. And I did, and we did a couple things, but he's one of those guys that kind of likes to move the goalpost. Once he's been proven wrong or his theory's not going the way he wants, he changes theories. So everything just keeps moving on. And I'm like, I'm not going to be your slave to do these experiments. I have other things to do. Now, there's a lot of sycophants of Mick where they ask me all these same questions. It's just regurgitating the same thing Mick comes up with. But his famous, which is very laughable, but his famous when he's on like social media or something experiment is when he takes a flashlight and he's got the lens and he's like, oh, see how the glare rotates? It's the same in the infrared. It's completely not. He doesn't understand. He has a FLIR 1 camera, which is a long wave infrared camera that he plugs into his phone, and he does little experiments like that. That's where he kind of thinks that he has a grasp on the technology. But what he doesn't realize is it's only one field of view. It's just 640 by 480 or whatever the resolution is on it, and it's just looking at the wide field of view, whatever's in the room. Now, with the FLIR systems, you're flipping lenses and you're using different magnifications, and there's different focal lengths and all these things going on that he's completely unfamiliar with. But he's kind of one of those guys that he knows enough to be dangerous.
Yeah, and you know what? He's a very intelligent guy, and I've said before when people have asked me to have Mick on the podcast, I there was a time I would have. I think now it would just be for ratings or likes, which some people have done, which is totally up to them. But there's an element to Mick would be able to have a conversation with me that I am no expert in that field, so I couldn't confidently say yes or no to a lot of the things he would potentially want to bring up. I would rather hear other experts talk to him. Now, you've brought up there, Dave, the GIMBAL video for a start, which is one of the famous videos that came to prominence late 2017, 2018, and it was of the object going along. It looks like it's cruising. In the video, it looks like it's above the clouds, and you can hear the pilots talking about it, and it slows down and then rotates. Now, we have since heard from Ryan Graves and others that there was a formation of 5 other objects which were off the camera or that we don't see, and they turned at quite a rapid pace and everything else, which is fascinating, but we don't have that footage. Now, when you first see footage like the gimbal footage, and you've talked a little bit about it there, what is it about it that's fascinating or interesting you?
Yeah, the first time I saw that, I gasped. I actually gasped because it's something that you're not going to see out of any kind of man-made aircraft. The thing about the hypothesis of that you're looking at the tail end of a jet, and that's just being glared from the heat, is you don't see the spiking that you normally see with a jet engine. It's a very consistent, solid object. And with the rotation, it remains a consistent object, and it doesn't bank to the left like you would expect an aircraft to do. It just kind of rotates. It doesn't follow any kind of laws of nature. It's just not right. And there's just a few things that, okay, there's a lot of speculation about when Mick does this thing with a video and he enhances the gain, and then you see some artifacts, as he calls them, and they rotate at the same time as the object rotates. It doesn't matter. I mean, okay, it could be that the tracker is trying to reacquire the subject when the object moves because it's seeing within its tracker bars the object just shift, rotate. It's not familiar with that, so it kind of reacquires. I don't know if that's the case or not, but the object clearly rotates against the cloud horizon. So there's nothing in the optics that's going to make a glare rotate against the cloud horizon. You're looking at a narrow field of view. This is like back into the heart of the infrared optics. Even the derotation device that was talked about a lot is just a mirror that rotates, so it's going to rotate the whole scene. So it's just a straw man argument. There's no point in arguing the whole rotation thing, which is the thing that people ask me the most about, like on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, and obviously it's the most fascinating part of that video, and the first time I saw it, it was the same as you, that wow, I mean, just the shape itself looks sort of disc shaped, and I know that could be many different things when you're picking up a heat signature or not, but it is the fact that it slows down and then rotates, and it clearly rotates to the naked eye. And then when I saw someone like Mick and a few others come out and say that it wasn't rotating, it's actually the background, my heart sank a little bit because I thought, oh, that would really put a massive wrench in this. But then other experts, and it may have been yourself or other people, came out and said, no, that's definitely not the case. This is absolutely rotating, which for me, that's the huge piece. Now, obviously, when it cuts off, and there's all sorts of speculation as to what happens next. We've heard from Ryan Graves recently that the object turns a bit like a conventional aircraft would, and then follows this other formation. Oh no, sorry, the gimbal object apparently turns at a 90-degree angle, and it was the 5 objects in front which banked like an ordinary craft would. Now, is there anything else in this video other than the turning of the object or rotating that's particularly interesting? What about the speed of it or anything like that you would pick up just at a glance?
Not so much. It just seems like it's very stable, because normally when you see aircraft and you're following an aircraft, something like that, there's going to be different movements. There's, you're fighting the wind. It just seems like it was extremely controlled. It was very mechanical in nature. When you see the rotation, it looked like it was on like a motor potentiometer assembly, and you were turning the knob and it just moves. I'd like to touch on one thing that Mick likes to use. He pulled one of my videos that I put on YouTube a long time ago, where I labeled gimbal exhaust because it kind of looked like the gimbal. It was a trainer plane flying out of NAS jacks. And I saw it, and I was just kind of playing around with the gains, the levels, and then I adjusted the focus, and I was like, that kind of looks like that gimbal object. This is, a few years back when it was fresh. And, I was not in the know about what Mick's agenda was, so I shared it with him. I was like, hey, check this out. Well, he jumped right on that. He's like, that's what it is. It's it's definitely an aircraft. And I said, you don't understand, Mick. I'm disproving this because it's completely out of focus. I defocused this greatly, but I was just kind of sharing with you type thing. No. He still uses that video to kind of debunk the gimbal object rotating.
And we had the other videos with the Go Fast and the Tic Tac. Which of those, if any, do you find interesting? Anything about them, again, which jumps out to you? Because I think those are probably two of the maybe less spectacular, just given the footage itself. But what about yourself? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, we think about this. The Go Fast was pretty interesting in that it broke track, because it's a pretty far away object, and it would really have to accelerate. I think it was to the left, at a great rate of speed in order to break track like that. Some of the pilots that I've talked to have said that's what made them gasp, because they're used to this equipment, it being airborne, and they said that it just doesn't happen. As far as the what was it? The
Go Fast breaks the track, and then I think is it FLIR 1? They're labelled as on the website now anyway, on TTSA, but then you've got the other one, which is the Tic Tac shooting across the surface of the water.
Well, I thought that was the Go Fast. I think the Tic Tac was the one. It's hard to remember. Do
you know what? I can YouTube it, because I think they get so confused now from what they were originally.
No, the FLIR one, that was a real boring one where it just shows like the orb and there's not much going on.
Yeah, the FLIR one just sits and then goes off.
Okay.
And the Go Fast is the one where it's going across the surface of the water. I've got the website up now.
Okay,
so
great.
FLIR one, it sits and then just goes off to the left.
Okay, so that was the FLIR one. The Go Fast is definitely interesting because there's cold object cruising across the sky that's obviously colder than the ocean below it. And like Jeremy Corbell did a big analysis on this. I kind of worked with him a little bit on that, but that's, it's not a bird. You would see a bird even at that distance. You would see the wings flapping, or you would see some kind of movement. This is just a solid orb object just hurtling through the sky. And I'm not one of those guys that can put together mathematical equations to tell you how fast the aircraft was going, and it was going this direction, and that meant that this is going that fast. I don't do those kind of things. That's out of my scope. So, but I can tell you, just looking at that thing, it's an anomaly. That's not anything typical that we normally see.
Have you heard about anything like those videos in the meantime from former colleagues in the Navy or otherwise?
Um, yeah, well, I'm working on something right now, but I signed an NDA and I'm kind of held to that.
Oh,
So
people are going to roll their eyes when they hear NDA, but I understand. Yeah, I get that, but it's that's good to know though that there's still other stuff out there you're working on.
yeah,
It wouldn't happen to be a 23-minute long video, would it?
was that the which one was that you're
So this
referring
is the
to?
video that Lou's just talked about recently, saying there's a 23-minute long video within the classified section of the UAP report, and apparently it's like the video to end all videos for what they've got anyway.
No, the one I'm thinking of that I'm working on is longer than that. Um, Now there's two videos I saw on Twitter. There was one that was like a warthog being chased by a UAP, and then there was one that was what they call the witch. I don't know how you say that in Spanish. It's like La Bruja or something like that. Did you see
Okay.
that?
No, I've not seen that one, but I don't mind. I'd like to touch on the warthog one first.
Okay.
Now, this is, and again, I've seen Mick do a video, but this is one that I would tend to just at a glance think Mick is correct that the object in the video isn't a UAP, but probably a bird.
A bug?
No, sorry, Scottish accent, a bird. Like it's because it seems to have a kind of flapping wing motion as it goes up. And I've also heard that if it's the same video we're talking about, it's got the aircraft flying about, but in the background you kind of see the little black object going up and up and up. Is that the same video we're talking about here?
I think so, but it didn't look like a bird to me. I mean, that would be some
No?
kind of super bird. Now, I mean, that's the thing. If you're looking at a warthog with that particular system, that FLIR system, which I'm familiar with, you're going to see wings flap, even if it's at a different distance. If that were a bird, it would be closer because the size of the bird versus the relative size of the aircraft. It looked to me like that little orb had an interest in that aircraft and started following it. I mean, the people that operate these on the ground, it's just you become familiar with it. You do this over and over, day after day, for hours and hours, and you just know what things are. That was not a bird following.
That's interesting because it was a few other people that I'd spoke to, because I think that particular piece of footage isn't brand new. It's been around just a little while, and I had heard initially when it was posted that it was something to do with like a drugs run, because I think it's based out of New Mexico or something,
Okay.
and it was something like that along those lines anyway. And it was very quickly put down as there's nothing to see in this. That it was being filmed because it was part of a drugs bust, and that was it. And then people obviously talked about the object in the background, but again, I'll leave it wide open and keep an open mind on it. If someone like yourself is saying that, given the size of it and the nature of it, that there's something to that object, then that's completely fair.
Well, I wouldn't rule out a drone at this point. I'm just saying it's not a bird.
Okay,
Yeah,
too
that's
too big, too big to be a bird.
yeah. Well, no, just the erratic, the movement of the. I could see it being a drone because of the movement, but birds don't move. They don't fly like that. They ride thermals. They just do, depending on the bird, or else they're directional. They're just not going to immediately follow aircraft. They stay away from aircraft.
Sure, and you mentioned another piece of footage, the Witcher or something in Spanish. You said, what was that one?
Yeah, that was I think it's La Bruja, Bruja. So it shows an object, like maybe the size of like a large man that's floating above the surface of the ground. I think it's around Arizona or somewhere on the border, and it just kind of moves in a linear direction. And the it's frustrating because being a FLIR operator, I would have zoomed in and changed gains and done a lot of different things, but this person just stayed at the same narrow field of view and just kind of panned watching this thing. But nonetheless, it was still very um, it was intriguing because it's a cold object. And you can tell because it's on black hot, which is in the symbology in the bottom left-hand corner. And it's passing by like some cattle, and they're black and they're just walking along, and it's just flying right behind them. And there's no erratic movement like you'd see from a balloon. Now, I kind of thought, what could this be, like a drug running drone that they're trying to cloak using like a wet cloth over the top of it, and the wind blowing against it would make it, it's a humid or arid desert. And I'm trying to put all these things together, but none of them's making sense. It just, you'll have to look that one up. It was pretty intriguing, but the most fascinating part is it's just a solid cold object.
I have made a note to look that one up, yep, and I certainly will. And I'll post a link for it as well in the description of the pod for anyone who wants to see it. I'm sure I'll be able to find it.
Yeah, right.
Now, what are the dangers of untrained eyes looking at these videos and commenting? I mean, I've seen recently, just I think in the last day or so, someone on Twitter had posted a picture of a camera they were going to buy, and it was a FLIR camera for about $200, like a handheld one. Now, I'm sure that is not the same equipment you're using, in your professional capacity, but what are your recommendations for just the general public looking to buy FLIR cameras to try and take pictures or film UFOs?
Yeah, unfortunately, those aren't really readily available. I mean, the technology you're talking about is thermography. So you have like a handheld unit. It doesn't matter if you plug it into your phone or you have, a unit that's like a monitor on a stick, something like that. But those, or like I said earlier, which is what Mick West has, it's a long wave camera. And it's often, what they'll do is they'll take like a daylight camera and overlap this long wave and kind of make a composite video. So that's kind of confusing as well. They're just two different technologies. There's no zoom to the thermography cameras, as far as I know. If there is, it's probably going to be digital. So you're not going to be able to see the objects in the sky like, like the ones that I have access to are the government ones that are on the aircraft.
Yeah, so people shouldn't be expecting for a couple of $100 to pick up something that's going to be filming like what they're seeing on YouTube and on Twitter, basically. So be very careful what they're buying.
Yeah, absolutely not. Those are used for like finding leaks around your doors,
Right,
see where the heat's coming in or something, or going up into your attic and looking at your insulation to make sure that's not leaking. There's practical applications for it, but it's mostly on an industrial level. It's not meant for, tracking the skies.
Don't go UFO hunting with one of those folks.
Right.
And we touched on it a little bit. We touched on it earlier, Dave, like the recent drops by Jeremy Corbell, who I know Jeremy is someone who's promoted. I don't know how well you know him. He says buddy in his tweets. But do you know Jeremy Corbell quite well?
We've talked on the phone, especially with that whole gimbal rotation. We talked for a couple hours. I think Jeremy is the type of guy that likes to take a story and from somebody else and publicize it. And that's pretty much what he does. I don't think there's any sinister things that he has going on. And I don't think he's all about, just hype. But Jeremy pretty much is what he seems like he is.
Yeah, and I mean, let's cards on the table. He's a filmmaker and a content creator, and he is not afraid to be in front of a camera. He's put people in front of Joe Rogan, but he makes sure he's sat beside them, and he likes to also star in his own documentaries, which are very good. The subjects of them I'm particularly interested in, but like you say, Jeremy's Jeremy. He's a character as much as he is someone who is breaking stories, if you want to call it that. But recently he's been at the centre of those hype kind of storms, as you talk about, with some leaks of one. We had the sphere objects, and that had a whole load of different data corroborating it. And also we had the bokeh video, which, well, I call it the bokeh video because that's what Mick West was labelling it as, but you'll know the one where they're looking through the night scope and they're seeing the triangular shape. Can I get your thoughts on that? I know that's not FLIR necessarily, but what are your thoughts on those triangular objects and the fact that they were labelled as being like pyramid shapes?
Yeah, that's one I was kind of not commenting on because I'm not going to say I don't know about the validity of it, but the flashing of the strobing of the pyramid, if you want to call it that, it seemed aircraft, like an aircraft flashing, but I'm not an expert. So one guy that did a good video on that is Chris Lido. L-E-H.
Yes, I've subscribed to him on YouTube. I'm trying to get him on the podcast as well.
Yeah, he did a pretty good video on that. So I would probably throw the ball in his court because that's not really down my path of expertise either.
Totally fair. And what about the video where we do have the FLIR camera on the sphere objects, which are kind of floating along and then seem to go into the ocean?
Oh, yeah. Okay, I think the one that like it just submerges.
Yes, yeah, and it's
Yeah,
got the audio to it as well. Yeah, that they're saying.
yeah,
I won't.
splash.
Yes, that's it. Splash. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, actually, I was on a FaceTime with Chris Lito because he wanted my opinion on what the FLIR would be like, and I told him my opinions, and we were kind of working through what was being seen from the aspect of the ship and the FLIR. So my misunderstanding was I thought the ship was kind of going along with it or it was traveling, but it turns out we analyzed the data and you're looking kind of straight ahead at the FLIR and it's not really traveling left right. It just kind of descends down, and that's what even made it creepier because I thought it was like something that was just kind of traveling and then decided to descend into the sea, which may or may not have been something, anomaly or some kind. But this was something that was just kind of stationary and then just decided to sink down into the sea. Because you would see if it was something like a jet engine going away from you, it would start to get smaller and fainter. It's just, it is what it is, what you think it'd be.
So that one you would say has got something a little bit more to it. Then that there's a good chance that's something anomalous.
Oh, I would say so. Yeah, that was a neat one.
Now, where do you think this is all going? Like you said, 17 years ago, this was unheard of to get this kind of footage. And now we seem to have, in the space of a couple of years, even though it's not enough for some people, we seem to have quite a lot of declassified or leaked or official military footage out there for us to look at involving potential UAPs or UFOs. Do you think we're going to keep getting more of this? Or do you think we've just been lucky in what we've got?
Yeah, that's all circumstantial, I guess. I mean, I was lucky to get that one footage out the back, where we were testing the system, and that was just random. So, but you got to see who's taping all these. It's the guys in the military. So maybe the aircraft, let's say it's alien aircraft, maybe they're wondering what we're doing with our capabilities and getting in for a closer inspection. My opinion is just all speculation as far as if there's going to be more, but I would say there probably would be more, but again, you'd have to sift through them to see what's right and what's an anomaly.
Now, clearly there's a chance that some of these objects are foreign adversarial technologies, but when we're looking at the truly anomalous cases, would you lean towards this being something more likely to be truly anomalous? And I wouldn't make you say alien or whatever that might entail. Or do you think there's a good chance this is more human based and foreign adversarial? Have
Okay.
you made up your mind on that yet?
So maybe call me old school, but every type of aircraft that I've seen has some kind of propulsion to it. There's always a lift. There's always or a jet in the back, but there's always lift with the wings because that's just the nature of aircraft. I haven't seen any aircraft that can move around where there's no obvious propulsion. So even DARPA, you familiar with DARPA?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so even them, I don't think they're going to come up with anything. And if they do, then it's groundbreaking technology. It's something just we have no concept of right now. So, or maybe if DARPA did it, they would have the concept. But I'm saying it's not anything that we as common folk would know anything about. So, yeah, either way is fascinating.
Well, it's been great having you explain some of that, Dave, and hopefully people have learned a little bit, if nothing else, from that as to what they should and shouldn't be looking out for. And that Bruja UFO, I'll be checking that one out. I've got some listener questions, and then we've got the quickfire round as well. First question, you touched on this before. This was from Nathan, but just to clear it up. So for the gimbal video, some skeptics have claimed it's the view of the tail end exhaust of a distant plane. One thing that's confused Nathan, if that claim is true, wouldn't the image of the plume reduce in size over time as the plane moves away further from the FLIR? Would that be correct?
Yeah, well, unless he's pacing it, and they're staying at the exact same speed. But yeah, you should see the plume spike, and it would become more faint as the plane got distant. So yes, in essence, that's correct. But I would say there's no jets out there that are going to just fly at one particular level. They're going to turn. I mean, the jet fighters that are operating the FLIRs, or I guess that would be the Wizzo in the back, they would know that this is not a jet. That's their jobs. That's what they do. So, yeah, I would say correct.
And you can also hear from the pilots looking at the footage as they talk about it that they know they're looking at something that's a bit unusual as well,
Sure.
which is fair. Dan, who's my regular co-host, he wanted to know, what part does the FLIR system play on a ship or fleet, and how important is that particular system to the whole operation?
Ooh, interesting. Yeah, I guess it depends on the mission. Like when I was in the Navy, it was the whole Bosnia Kosovo thing. So I worked on a different pod. It was a data link pod that they would launch. It's now the Slam ER, but they would launch a missile, and it was video guided, so you could see from the cockpit what you were going towards, and then you could guide it with a thumb wheel or whatever. But with the FLIR, same kind of thing. It's a target acquisition. You're like, I want to bomb this building at this particular latitude, longitude, and okay, there it is. I see it right in the sights, and laser designator, and you hit it. So it's all about just, yes, I would say it's pretty vital in some circumstances, depending on the terrain, that kind of thing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, yeah, and it makes sense, but I've got a follow-up on that. Now, I'm going to try and word this properly, and I might just say it and hopefully you can pick up what I mean, but how up-to-date is the FLIR system? Because I appreciate what it's looking at and the purpose of it, but obviously it still produces a certain quality. Is it as good as it can get, or can the FLIR system become more, do you think, or do you know?
Do you have one in particular that you're talking about?
No, just we're looking at these FLIR videos and they show what they show. So on that gimbal video, it's FLIR, if I'm using that correctly. But
Okay, I got you.
could that be better? Could you get anything more from that particular system when it's looking at that object? Are there improvements that could be made, or is that the end of that technology before something else would have to take over?
Well, yes and no. The technology can get better, and I believe what you're seeing in the gimbal and the Tic Tac and the Go Fast, I think those are analog videos, which means you have your 640 by 480. It's just like what you call a standard video. Now we've moved on to digital video, so now we're at the 720, the 1080, that kind of thing, and I'm sure 4K is on the horizon. So yes, it's definitely going to get better, but we're just looking at kind of the technology that's antiquated or fading, getting rid of it. We're phasing it out. So yeah, like a lot of our old analog FLIRs, we don't even use them anymore. We've since demilled them and moved on to, I think we're completely high def now.
And I was going to say, most people would know 720 or 1080 as HD when you're looking at TVs. Would something like the gimbal video, so we've seen the analog version, or the standard definition quality as the old money we would call it, is there more than likely HD versions of those?
Um, I would assume so by now. Yeah, if I were Raytheon, I would definitely be cranking out the high def ones, and that's not much as far as changing out optics. That's just pretty much changing the basic cameras that are seeing, like a camera body. So you could change those out, and then you still could use the existing system without having to replace the entire pod, the FLIR pod. You can use everything else, just replace the cameras. You might have a different protocol as far as talking. You'd have to have digital talk instead of analog talk, to put it on layman's terms.
No, that's fair. And again, if I saw the HD version of the gimbal footage, would myself as a layman just looking at it, not knowing how to read what's on there, would I notice any difference to the actual picture itself?
Yeah, well, the first thing you'll probably see is it's going to fill the screen. This is something I'm thinking about when I look in the shop. You're definitely, it's going to be bigger. It's going to fill the screen, and you're going to see more detail. And there's also more additions like a digital detail enhancement that will up the resolution. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's not up converting. It just makes it's hard to explain.
No, that's
Uh,
fair.
but yeah, you'll definitely be able to notice a difference. I mean, we can just push a button and you can see analog to digital, you know, kind of a comparison when we're operating them.
Awesome. Next up, Mike had a question. He wants to know, in your videos, you shoot objects like balloons, etc. They're also relatively close. Do you plan on being able to shoot anything at a longer distance or replicate conditions of UFO videos? And he does say that he understands you just can't fly an F-18.
So he wants me to catch a balloon at a further distance.
Yeah, I think he wants you to try and film them from those distances potentially away.
Yeah, actually, I caught a balloon today that was in the sky that was at a further distance, and I was watching it, and it was a mylar balloon, like a star shape. So I watched it and watched it. And I got like 10 minutes of footage of this thing, and it's consistent from like a wide field of view. Well, actually, I was about a narrow field of view, but you could tell it's that balloon. But as it travels out and becomes more faint, it has the same characteristics as it tumbles in the sky. It's showing a reflective ground, which is warm, and a reflective sky, which is cold. So you're seeing the characteristics of a mylar balloon tumbling in the sky, as you would think. So I do have that. I just need to, put that out there.
Awesome. So keep an eye on the YouTube channel for that one. And Graham has a good question, and I like this one, and he means it completely seriously. How exactly would a seagull show up on FLIR?
Well, yeah, it depends on the scene setting you're looking at, but for most scenes, you're going to see a hot seagull. I mean, it's just going to look like a bird. It is what it is. I mean, even if it was flying on the ground, it's going to be hotter than its surrounding environment. So you will see what looks like a white seagull. You're not going to see features. It's just going to be like a white shaped seagull object. And you'll see the flapping of wings, and it'll be an obvious thing.
Awesome. So definitely none of the videos we have discussed, especially things like the tic tac going across the top of the ocean, is definitely not a seagull.
No, I mean, if it was shaped like a boomerang and it had a like a blob in the middle, then I would say that might be a bird but it's an orb. It's not shaped like a bird, and you don't see any movement. There's no birds that I know of that can fly distances like that without moving wings that close to the surface that are that cold. It's ridiculous.
Awesome. That's great. Now, listen, let's move on to the quick fire round. And then once we finish that, Dave is going to stay with me for a short while to go over to the Patreon and Apple subscription area, where we'll be talking about his favourite UFO case and any other maybe favourite videos he has as well. So stick about for that if you're signed up to those services. Now, we'll finish it off with a quick fire round, Dave. I'm going to name a few different people or places, just topics we haven't quite discussed on the body of the interview, and just to get your thoughts on them. And if you don't have any, we can move on to the next one. So the first one would be Luis Elizondo.
Well, if he indeed is responsible for the 3 videos that came out from ATIP, and if that is indeed an organization or was an organization, then yeah, that's fantastic. I give him props for that. I'm kind of skeptical because it appears to me he's kind of jumped on the whole media bandwagon. I've reached out to him on Twitter and I think some other social media, and he had no response. And I even expressed my frustration that he did not respond. So, how is anybody going to feel about that? I was like, well, I guess I don't know much about him, but I think his videos are cool. But, I don't know what he says is true or not, but a lot of people like to think that he does, and they kind of elevate him to this status. I don't know. It's hard for me to tell you. I see the poster you have behind you.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to dog out your guy, but
no, listen. I've said in this subject, you've always got to be prepared to be let down at each and every turn because it's happened for so long. And I don't think you can go 100% into anything in this subject. I like Lou, I speak to him semi-regularly, and I have no reason to disbelieve what he said in his background, and I've put a lot of faith in that, but I know I won't be the first person to put faith in something or someone in this subject and be let down, so fingers crossed it's going well so far, but it's your opinion's perfectly valid.
Well, no, I mean, you know more than I do then, because I've never even talked to him. So all I have to judge my opinion is the media that I have seen,
Sure.
and the fact that he didn't respond to me, which is, he could be a very busy guy, and I'm not holding it personal, but, you know, I'd like to talk to him sometime, kind of get his opinion on things. But, I was just in the Navy. I wasn't any kind of CIA spy or, special program director or anything like that. So, I mean, I only know so much.
No, that's totally fair. The next one is Skinwalker Ranch. Have you got any thoughts on the property? I don't know if you've seen any of the show.
Yeah, again, it's just the level of media that I've been exposed to, which is pretty limited. I've seen some of the TV show. I didn't watch Jeremy's video. I don't know too much about it, so I'll probably pass on that one.
Yeah, fair. Someone who's closely associated with Jeremy is Bob Lazar. Any thoughts on the Bob Lazar story?
Yeah, that's a really controversial one right there. It's like, it's the dream. It's like every UFO lover's dream is Bob Lazar, oh, he's been to the special plant, the S4, and he's done this and that, and he's got all this technical knowledge, but, the government has erased all his stuff. That's a hard one to tell. I'd say, 50-50, because again, I'm just exposed to what I've been shown. So I don't know if he's real or not. Jeremy seems to think he is, and he seems to like to build a lot of electronic stuff and rockets and whatever he does.
Yeah.
But again, that's another guy I'd like to talk to is Bob, because I would have a lot of questions about what his experience was.
I think it's far easier to get in touch with Lou Elizondo than it is Bob Lazar, but I think the way to Bob Lazar seems to be through Jeremy Corbell, and I think you've got that line if anything. So yeah, he's an elusive character, certainly. The Phoenix Lights incident, do you have much to say on that, or have you seen any footage from that back in the 90s?
Yeah, it was like the big curve kind of in the sky
the V-shaped crack. Yeah, it was lights in the sky, and the military explained it off as flares.
Yeah, it was like 97 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of sightings. There was wasn't there thousands of people citing that?
Yeah, most of the county saw it, and it wasn't just over one night either.
Oh wow, no, that's definitely a fascinating one. It's unfortunate we didn't have the technology we have now to get a better glimpse at it. It's probably the old camcorder, where you had the little rocker zoom and stuff. But it's in the dark. Yeah, it's anybody's guess, but it didn't look like any kind of aircraft flares, because they would move down. But yeah, that was a fascinating one.
Awesome. And the last one, as I like to ask all my guests, what does disclosure mean to you?
Disclosure. Well, it's risky. Depends on what kind of disclosure you're doing. I mean, if the government said, "Hey, guess what, guys? We do have these aliens, and we're researching this technology," that there's going to be any kind of frenzy as far as religious ideology or anything like that. But there's going to be a lot of questions like, why were you holding this? There's going to be transparency issues. I think that's what they're trying to hide, is they're trying to cover their butts on this. They don't want, I don't know what they know, but you don't want the common person to know certain things. And to an extent, I can agree with that. Being in the Navy, there was a lot of CYA things going on. There's a lot of things going on that nobody knows about, but that's why nobody wants them to know in the military, why they're going on. Does that make any sense? Because there's no logical reason for the general public to know, because it would just cause, oh, now we got the media coming in and asking a bunch of questions, and there's going to be responsibility, and there's going to be, people hanging and this kind of stuff. So,
yeah, and I know some people don't like it, but I'm trying to look at things from all sides, and I can see why. Not that it's right, but if I was in charge of things now, then disclosure would be an admission of things that have been done in the past, and you would be held accountable for those. Whereas if you push ahead with, if they are pushing ahead with some sort of confirmation, then you can play a little bit dumb, and you can just leak little bits as if we're finding this out together, and you kind of have a starting point to go from, and then you don't have to go back to Roswell and different cases in the past, and let's, that's the way I look at it. So if you go from now, then you kind of almost just, let's forget what happened in the past and let's move forward together. And
that's good theory.
And you know what? Personally, I think even if they did go with the, if President Biden came out on the White House lawn and said, okay, cards on the table, he's got Putin on one side, he's got, everyone else on the other, and we know about the aliens, we know about the spacecraft, they come from here, they come from there. I don't think 99.9% of the world would care about what happened in the past. I think you've got a lot of the UFO community and some others who would want to know about Roswell and all that kind of stuff. But I think the general world population would be quite happy moving forward with that knowledge and working from that point. But that's to be decided or seen in the future, I suppose.
Yeah, that's definitely a good topic for conversation. I've kind of kicked that idea around with some of the guys at work, and I don't think it's not going to be the end of the world if the government tells us we have these things. But at the same time, you could just see in simple politics, I think both sides of the political realm are trying to hide things, this and that, to, maintain their seats, their positions of power, that kind of stuff. It kind of comes with the territory.
Absolutely. Dave, you'll be staying with me for a few more minutes over on Patreon and Apple Podcasts and the premium service to talk about your favourite case. But in the meantime, for those finishing up with us now on the main feed, how can people find you online, and also how can they subscribe to your YouTube channel?
Sure. Just Dave Falch on Twitter. And then if you get onto the YouTube and just type in Dave Falch, it's the first one that comes up. You just click on that and peruse at your leisure.
And I'll make sure those links are in the subject and the description of the podcast as well, Dave.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Anytime, and look forward to some of you joining us over on the premium service as well. That is all for this week's show. Thank you very much for listening. Please remember to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. You can like, retweet and subscribe. That would all be very much appreciated. The shows are being uploaded onto YouTube as we speak more and more. You can sign up at patreon.com/That UFO podcast to access the shows ad-free as well. Please get in touch on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, That UFO podcast. Of course, on Twitter, it's at UFO UAPAM. And again, folks, as always, keep looking up. You never know what you might see.
It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer, more like a hubcap designed by Chaucer, a little Baroque and quite steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Folk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue. I don't think he expected me to see his ass, but I'd had some champagne and smoked a little around. Meditative game of state full on meta. I can't imagine how it could have been any better. I got to the top of the stairs and there he was. Like, you awake? I was about to abduct you, cuz.